Ava called her father sobbing. Her boyfriend had snapped her arm. But the real nightmare.
Chris Alvarez had spent years in the Navy, but nothing haunted him like the distance growing between him and his daughter. Ava had become quieter over the last few months, and every instinct he had told him something was wrong. One late night at the bar he tried to dismiss the unease, but it lingered like a shadow. When Ava finally called him in tears, his world changed instantly. Her voice trembled as she told him her boyfriend had snapped her arm during an argument. She admitted she had been afraid to tell him sooner. Chris felt a cold focus settle over him, the same clarity he used to rely on in combat. He told her to pack a bag and assured her he was on the way. When he reached her apartment, she sat on the couch pale and shaking, her arm bent in a way that made him wince. He held her gently and promised she was safe now. At the hospital, he listened to her explain how the relationship had turned dark. She told him about the jealousy, the threats, and the friends who bragged about dangerous things. Chris realized this wasn't just abuse. It was connected to something criminal. The detective handling the case promised they would arrest Darren, but Chris had no faith in the slow grind of the system. After settling Ava at home, he called the men who once fought beside him. They arrived without hesitation, ready to help him protect his daughter. His team dug into Darren's life and discovered he worked for a drug operation in Portland. They found records of cash deposits, violence, and connections to a man named Zavala who controlled a distribution network. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Darren was involved with dangerous people. Chris knew that if Darren felt cornered, Ava could still be in danger. They tracked Darren, listened to his calls, and realized he had no fear of consequences. So Chris and his team built a trap. They turned his arrogance into panic by manipulating messages and making him believe his own boss suspected him of betrayal. Darren spiraled quickly, trying to prove his loyalty before he was eliminated. Chris watched him unravel from a distance with calculated precision. When Darren rushed to the warehouse full of drugs and money to clear his name, the D raided the place minutes later. Darren was arrested, surrounded by evidence he couldn't deny. Chris felt only a quiet relief. But the danger wasn't over because Zavala still existed and now suspected someone had exposed his operation. Chris received a call warning him that men connected to Zavala were parked outside his house. He immediately rushed home and got his daughter to safety. He realized the only way to protect her fully was to eliminate the source of the threat. His team tracked Zavala to a motel hours later. They approached with the calm precision of men who had survived too many missions to count. Chris confronted Zavala himself, gun raised but voice steady. Zavala denied everything, but Chris saw the fear in his eyes. They took him alive and dragged him to a secluded location. Chris made it clear Zavala had a choice: confess everything or face consequences far worse than prison. Zavala cracked and began talking. The next morning, the DA had enough evidence to bring down the entire network. The detective called to tell Chris the arrests were happening across the city. She hinted she didn't want to know how Chris had gathered the information. Chris only cared that Ava was finally safe. Darren faced charges so severe that he would spend decades behind bars. Ava watched him get sentenced and felt something heavy lift off her chest. She told Chris she finally felt free. Over time she healed, rediscovered her strength, and found a new place to live. She thanked her father for fighting for her even when she felt broken. Chris told her he'd always choose her over anything else in the world. Life slowly returned to normal, and the nightmares faded. Chris kept running the tavern while staying close to the men who helped him. They shared quiet understanding and pride in what they accomplished. The detective visited sometimes, grateful for what they had done. Ava graduated and moved forward, stronger than before. She began building the future she wanted, unbroken and unafraid. Chris stood by her every step, proud of the woman she became. He knew he had crossed lines, but he also knew he would do it again without hesitation. Protecting her had been the most important mission of his life. And in the end, the danger faded, justice was served, and Ava's smile returned. That was all he ever wanted.